Everyone's focused on the Panthers taking a defensive tackle or an edge rusher at 8, but should they consider taking a cornerback? I'll answer that question among other listener questions in this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, like today, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. You can either at me or DM me, or also follow me over on Blue Sky, also at Julian Council, where you can just at me with your weekly Friday mailbag questions for next week's show. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, and the weekly Friday mailbag is back. The last day of February. We are only 10 days away from the beginning of the legal negotiating period here in the NFL, and the official start of free agency being 12 days away. And I'm so excited to finally get there. So one more week of trying to fill content with what the Panthers may be doing and all that. Then we'll actually have real news to talk about and look at what this roster potentially could look like in 2025, as then we'll shift our focus towards the end of March, fully looking at the 2025 NFL draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But Brody is going to lead us off by discussing the 2025 NFL draft up there in Green Bay and saying, let's help Dan Morgan approach this 2025 draft. Statistically, we, being the Carolina Panthers, had the worst defense in history. I wouldn't want to say we in that situation, Brady. I would not want to be a part of the worst defense statistically in history. But yes, the Panthers did. So that's one of those situations where you probably don't want to say we, because I didn't miss any tackles. I didn't blow sacks. That's not on me. That's on them. But, of course, I understand what you're saying. Statistically, the Panthers had the worst defense in history, but let's dive into it more. The Panthers had the 9th highest blitz rate, with the lowest pressure rate this year. They also had the worst run defense. Which player could we select with the number 8 pick to help the most with those two statistics alone? Well, talking to Damian Parson on the show yesterday, Damian Parson, one of the two hosts of Locked On NFL, does that with Keith Sanchez, also covers the draft for Bleacher Report, was on the show yesterday. Encourage all of y'all to go back and to watch or listen to that episode, as he did a great job. And I talked to him afterwards when we had stopped recording, and I had seen him in these Panther Twitter streets before, so I knew he was the right guy to bring on the show. And he doesn't live that far away. He lives down in South Carolina, I think probably in the Greenville area. Not trying to give away where the dude lives, but, as far as the guy that would make the most sense, bring up everything you brought up there, Brody, and from the conversation that I had with Damian on Thursday, it's Jalon Walker, who, it just dawned on me, is from Salisbury, and it actually kind of makes sense now. Someone who follows recruiting like I do, now the name makes sense that, oh, yeah, that is a North Carolina guy. Just all these years, they kind of mix together, and it's just yet another guy who gets out of the state. That fence has never been built around North Carolina. He went down to Georgia, and it worked out for him, obviously, as he's set to be likely a top 10 pick. So this is a guy who would be coming back home, but he's also someone, when Damian's talking about the culture, that he has leadership off the wazoo that has been talked about. That's the kind of guy that you want to bring in here, of the fact that he can play that off-ball linebacker, that he could potentially play kind of that big nickel for you. He could also be that edge rusher. He checks a lot of boxes that Carolina is looking for this offseason. So when you talk about the Panthers having the 9th highest blitz rate, but the lowest pressure rate in the NFL, well, you won't need a blitz that often when you have a guy like Jalon Walker who can just get home. But when you do blitz, he will be able to actually get pressure. When you talk about the worst run defense, he's somebody who can help you out in that situation as well. So just all around, everything I heard from Damian about Jalon Walker, and like, I watched this guy play at UGA. I know he's a great player, but damn, like checking every single box that you would want out of a player to come here to Carolina. So, yeah, if we're trying to help Dan Morgan, I think Damien helped us yesterday, Brody. It's going to be Jalon Walker. That's the player that Carolina should be looking to select, help him with the run defense and also help them as an edge rusher. The next question comes from, it was like W. Blackburn on Twitter. Again, just let me know what your real name is whenever you guys at me or DM me, especially when your Twitter handle doesn't have it in there or you don't have it as your bio name. No big deal, but it's like W. Blackburn something. But he says, since mostly everyone is talking about defensive tackle or edge rusher for Carolina at 8, do you hate the idea of taking a corner like Jahdae Barron from Texas or Will Johnson from Michigan at 8 to play alongside a hopefully extended Horn and lock up the corner room for years to come? I don't hate it. Don't necessarily love it as much as I love the idea right now of Jalon Walker there at 8, or just taking any of the top edge rushers there at 8, or taking a defensive tackle, which right now, and here's the problem with you asking me this right now. If the Panthers go out there and they are able to sign like BJ Hill or Javon Hargrave, or we'll talk about Jonathan Allen here momentarily on the show, if they bring in one of those guys to come in to play in a defensive line, then okay, yeah, defensive tackle, no longer necessarily a pressing need at 8. If they are able to trade for Myles Garrett, or if the Joey Bosa situation works out into their favor when he probably gets cut in Los Angeles, then edge rusher, not necessarily what you need to get at 8. Now, I still would think that they would probably want to go get somebody there at 8, but it's not as pressing of a need. If they don't end up re-signing Mike Jackson and they don't bring in a corner that you feel like would make sense as a starter, then yeah, at 8, that could make sense. But right now, I would go D tackle or edge rusher. So it's hard to say definitively what they should do without knowing what's going to happen 10 days plus from now, once the legal negotiating period begins and then free agency officially begins and the Panthers start signing players, which is why I always tell you it's hard for me to answer these draft questions until we see what happens in free agency and to know necessarily what the direction they should go. Now, best player available, that is really the answer that I can give you, and also kind of the answer that they would like to give you as well. Like every team wants to go in free agency, being able to set themselves up to go best player available. So the Panthers, I think, would like to get a defensive tackle. They'd like to get an edge rusher. They would like to get a corner all in free agency and fill every hole. But then once you get to the draft, go BPA, best player available. But looking at this, it could make sense. I don't know if Jahdae Barron, who did win the Thorpe Award for best corner in college football, which is ridiculous because that was Travis Hunter, who also won the Blitnikoff, the best wide receiver in college football. So I don't really understand how Travis Hunter, who clearly is the best player in college football last year, won the Heisman Trophy. You ever heard of it? And won the Blitnikoff, won the Walter Camp, won every single one of those. How he wasn't also voted as a Thorpe Award winner. But Jahdae Barron, great year at Texas, really good player. Probably more of a guy you want to play at nickel than in the outside once he gets to the NFL. Will Johnson, excellent. I couldn't remember his name yesterday. Really good player. Was banged up all this past season at Michigan, but was key to helping them win that national championship back in 2023 when Jim Harbaugh was still their head coach. I think he would probably make more sense at 8 than Jahdae Barron would, and I would be all about that. And Will Johnson is a bigger kind of guy, and we talked about this with Damien yesterday. We've talked about this in the past when Fitterer first came over here. Scott Fitterer, the former Carolina Panthers general manager, for those who do not remember him somehow, he was pretty big on what the Seahawks had and having those long, taller DBs like a Richard Sherman. And you've seen that in the guys Carolina has drafted, J.C. Horn that they've signed and who they traded for. And I know Scott's gone, Dan's in, but Dan was over there in Seattle for a long time as well. Look at Mike Jackson, who came over from Seattle. And, of course, he was drafted by John Snyder and that organization. So I would think that Will Johnson from Michigan would make more sense at 8. And, yeah, I would like to see that if that's what happens. Like, I would not hate it. I would not necessarily, if the options defensive tackle, edge rusher, and corner, if that's what the options end up being come April, I wouldn't love it. But I certainly could come to really like that situation if they end up taking a guy like Will Johnson, who I do think would end up being that pair with J.C. Horn for the years to come, as you're talking about here, my guy. All right, let's take a quick pause. Come back, and Shaq Thompson, no longer Carolina Panther. Where does he rank among the best Panther defenders of all time? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The game tips off. The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, the weekly Friday mailbag. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions in. You can also at me, or I don't think they have DMs on Blue Sky. But you can at me on Blue Sky. Also ask me some questions, and I now come to think of it, think I forgot to go over there. So I got to get used to going over Blue Sky to look at your questions. So please hit me up next week for the weekly Friday mailbag. Over now to Andrew, who simply asked, where would you rank Shaq Thompson on the list of Panthers defensive players all time? So 30 seasons of Carolina Panthers football and plenty of defensive players who have come and gone. Certainly, there have been some greats. There have been some pretty goods. There have been some average. There have been some bad. But let's focus, obviously, on the all-time greats. I'm going to just give you right now, like the top. I was going through this, and it's difficult. The top 9 I have right now, and I do not have Shaq Thompson in this top 9. And please, at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council, or at me on Blue Sky to let me know what like your top 10 would be, or even just your top 5 you want to go there of the all-time greatest Panthers defensive players as they were Panthers. Let's understand that there have been guys like Reggie White that played in Carolina briefly. He was not an all-time great Carolina Panther. Now, Kevin Green, he actually was pretty damn good while he was in Carolina, so we'll talk about him as well. But don't be like, oh, this guy was like Jared Allen. Came here, played 10 games, whatever it was, during that 2015 season, then hung it up. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Like that, you can't add him to the list because he didn't do really any of that while he was in Carolina. He did some of it, but those are guys that I would not put on this list. Like we're focusing in on them as Carolina Panthers. Number 1 is Luke Kuechly. And this may be controversial, but I do think Luke Kuechly is the greatest defender in the Carolina Panthers uniform as a Carolina Panther that this franchise has ever had. I mean, you can go through the statistics if you like. Let me go ahead and pull up Pro Football Reference so I can do just that. 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, AP Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, AP Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2012, Pro Football Writers Association Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2012. I mean, Sporting News Defensive Player of the Year in 2013. He's on the All-Decade team. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. So Luke Kuechly, I have him as number 1 all time. Then behind him would be Julius Peppers, who I'm sure plenty of you would vote as number 1. And I hate to not do it because, like, I love this dude. He went to North Carolina. He helped power the Tar Heels to the Final Four back in 2000. I'm always going to love Julius Peppers. Like, I'm always going to love that guy. And he's a Hall of Famer. And he's like the first like real Panthers player to go into the Hall of Fame. And that's not to discredit Sam Mills. I did have somebody on Blue Sky hit me up and like ask like, why is Sam Mills seen as such a pillar? And I was like, honestly shocked that anyone would ever ask that, considering the whole keep pounding. Like it's right there in front of you. That's why, aside from like how well he played as a player. But you look at Julius Peppers, he was AP Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2002 as a Panther. He's a Pro Bowler, AP first team in 2004, 2005 Pro Bowl, 2006 Pro Bowl, also was a AP All-Pro first team, Pro Bowl in 2008, 2009, 2010. Like, I don't know, maybe it's him over Luke. It's either one of those guys. You can go 1A, 1B, but Kuechly, Peppers, those are 1 and 2, or both just number 1. I put Thomas Davis as number 3, in my opinion, as far as the all-time greatest Carolina Panther defensive players. Looking at TD, he's right up there. As far as solo tackles, he has the most solo tackles in the history of the Panthers, and I'm trying to do the math quickly. He may also have the most tackles. I think actually he does in franchise history. 3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro, and those came later on in his career because he missed a lot of time early on because of a knee injury. I mean, 2009, 2010, 2011, injury-plagued seasons, and then he comes back in 2013, first time. Oh, sorry, he was almost a comeback player of the year, but it was 2015, 16, 17. He was a Pro Bowler, and he was a first-team All-AP player back in 2015. So he's number 3 to me. Sam Mills, got him as number 4. I mean, I think a lot of that also has to do with just the impact he had on the franchise, but he was here briefly, but he was a damn good player when he was here in Carolina. He finished 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting in 1995. The inaugural season was a first-team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler in 1996, and then was also pretty damn good in 1997. So I got him up there at 4. John Beeson, you could argue that John Beeson should be ahead of Sam Mills, and I would not necessarily be that mad at you. He finished 2nd in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting in 2007, was a Pro Bowler, first-team AP All-Pro back in 2008, Pro Bowler, second-team All-Pro in 2009, Pro Bowler in 2010. Those are his first 4 years in Carolina. He and Luke Kuechly and Jeremy Chin are the only 3 Panther defenders to come out and have 3 straight years of 100-plus tackles in a season. So he's number 5, in my opinion. I got Mike Minner 6, Charles Johnson 7, Kevin Green up there at 8, Chris Jenkins is 9. And then, you go with Chris Gamble at 10. You go with Mike Rucker at 10, KK Short. I would not have Shaq Thompson in the top 10. I may not even have him in the top 15 if I keep building this out. When you just look at the linebacker position in Carolina, Luke is arguably the best player in Panthers history overall, but defensively, you have Thomas Davis, of course, all-time leading tackler, Sam Mills, John Beeson. He wasn't better than any of those guys. And arguably, his general manager, Dan Morgan, who had a ton of issues of concussions during his career in Carolina, was a better player than Shaq. And Shaq had to wait his time. If he gets to come in immediately and start in 2015 and be a 10-year starter in Carolina, maybe he's up there. But he had to play behind the 2 best linebackers in franchise history and still came out as a pretty damn good player in 4th all-time in tackles in franchise history. So he's good. I wouldn't have him in the top 10. I don't know if I'd have him in the top 15. So, yeah, I mean, maybe he's 15th, maybe he's 14th. I'm not sure. I'd have to keep building it out, but I do think probably he's in the top 15, but I would not have him in the top 10 of Panthers defensive players. But please let me know what your top 10 would be. Hell, if you want to just rank every single defensive player in the history of the Carolina Panthers and send it to me, you're going to probably have to send me a Google doc of that and link me to it. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Seth asking about Jonathan Allen, who requested a trade. Seth saying, should we, the Panthers, look at a trade for Jonathan Allen, or should the Panthers avoid him since he is 30 years old and coming off of a significant injury? What would the compensation for Washington be? What would the compensation be for Washington to trade him? Okay, well, Jonathan Allen, 2-time Pro Bowler. He has a cap hit of $22.3 million. Washington would save $16.3 million in cap space, whether he is traded or released before June 1. Allen is 30. He missed 9 games past year with a torn left pectoral muscle, which they thought was going to be season ending, but was not actually season ending. Now, looking over at overthecap.com, they kind of broke this down to kind of answer your question here. Allen is due $17 million in cash for 2025 season as part of the last year of his player contract. Go back to last year in 2024, Washington invested at the interior defensive line by signing Daron Payne to a 4-year, $90 million contract. And then they took in the second round Johnny Newton out of Illinois. Allen requesting a trade would logically mean that Washington is not willing to extend his current contract, or that the two sides cannot agree on the numbers of an extension. Any team that trades for Allen should be prepared to complete a contract extension immediately after the trade is completed. Most teams will likely wait for Washington to release Allen, then attempt to sign him to a favorable contract as a street free agent. This path will lead to a lower value contract. With an incoming strong draft class defensive lineman, Allen may have difficulty finding a trade partner for Washington. So Listening to that, the Panthers should not trade for Jonathan Allen. They should wait for Washington to get all that cap space, and they should then go out there and sign him to a far more reasonable deal than trading for him and then having to extend him. Like, that's the thing. You got to trade and give up assets, and then you got to give the guy a boatload of money when you just paid Derek Brown a ton. You brought in Jalon Robinson last year. No. They're going to have to pay somebody this year, but don't do it by trading for them. Sign the player. If they're a free agent, don't trade for the player. So, no, they should not, just based off of that information, trade for Jonathan Allen. But if he's a free agent, I'm all for it. All right, let's take a quick pause, come back, and I'll answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked on Panthers. All right, let's go over to JD now as we're back here on this weekly Friday mailbag. JD saying, year 3 quarterbacks, we've seen teams trade for a wide receiver and draft defense, Tua and Tyreek Hill, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, etc. Is it a possibility of trading for a big-time wide receiver like DK Metcalf? Yeah, I really hope it's a possibility. Now, there is another receiver that I would rather have, and you guys already knew who that is, in T. Higgins, and we talked about this yesterday, me and Damon and all of you, and he was very in on Carolina doing that, getting an experienced veteran who can come in and help out the Panthers. Now, I had somebody DM me asking about the whole T. Higgins situation and saying how they were a little concerned about the injuries in recent years and whether that would make some sense. And, like, I was thinking about it. Okay, like, totally fair. Football's a brutal game, so guys are going to get injured, and he has not had the kind of injury history that would make you not want to pay him. It's not like he's missing incomplete seasons or only playing 2, 3, 5 games, and that being the case for him. And hell, you look at Cincinnati, like Joe Burrow, torn ACL, had the wrist. He's had 2 years where he's missed a ton of time, and that did not stop the Bengals from giving him a bunch of money. Now, these situations aren't the same, but you could ask the question, well, Joe Burrow's had a lot of injuries. Do you want to give him the kind of money? Yeah, because he's a good player. T. Higgins, good player as well. So I think it's a no-brainer. He's going to get paid. Like, someone's going to give him, like, a ton. So would you rather be Cincinnati, who already said they're going to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL? They cannot walk that one back. So Cincinnati's going to have to pay T. Higgins, I mean, not that much. They're going to have to pay him a lot of money to retain him. Any other team that has to be able to trade for him, if that's what happens, if it's a tag and trade situation, which Tuesday, 4 p.m., that's the deadline, March 4th, to figure out whether he's going to be franchise tagged or not. Someone's going to pay him a lot of money. And doesn't necessarily have to be Carolina, I suppose. I would like for that to happen. I'm not concerned about the injuries. Anybody. We just saw with Derek Brown. Guy has not had any injury issues at all in Carolina. Gets paid a ton of money. And what happens week 1 of the next season? Tears his meniscus, out for the year. That's someone who you had no injury concerns about. And if he gets injured again this upcoming season, you're like, oh no, injury concerns, what a terrible contract. Well, leading up to that contract, you had no issues at all. Now, if T. Higgins goes out there and starts having all these injury issues still, and you're like, you already knew leading to the contract that this may be an issue, then you can look at it and be like, wow, what the hell are you doing? But it's football, man. You can't predict who's going to get hurt. You can't predict what offensive lineman is going to be blocking and then going to have someone blocked into them and then break their leg. Like, it's just, it happens. So I'm not concerned about that necessarily. And DK Metcalf is great. Why would Seattle do that? I guess maybe they look at, Jackson Smith and Jigba kind of going to replace Tyler Lockett, no, as their slot guy. Why? I don't know why they would do that. Like, those are things that just don't make any sense to me. The T. Higgins thing makes plenty of sense. You already have the best receiver in the NFL. And there's always I don't like this receiver class coming out right now. So I wouldn't necessarily want to address it this year as far as wide receiver. I don't know if there's a wide receiver 1 in this draft class. We'll see as time goes on. Those are just the things. Like the Garrett Wilson thing, that doesn't make any damn sense to me why the Jets would do that. The DK thing doesn't make any damn sense to me why the Seahawks would do that. But yet there are things that continuously, the Titans with A.J. Brown, like John Robinson lost his job because of that. The next year, and he had a lot of bad draft picks. They brought in Treylon Burks to try to replace him. He's not done that. And that's well after they fired John Robinson. But John Robinson build a winner in Tennessee. They were the number 1 overall seed in the AFC playoffs. Yeah, they lost Cincinnati and Joe Burrow, but they had a good team. They went to the title game a couple years prior to that with Ryan Tannehill as their quarterback still, of course, and they were right there in Kansas City in a competitive game. He built a winner. And I was there in Tennessee when he first got hired. Titans, they were coming off, they were fine. Like Mike Pilarki took them to the playoffs. Marcus Mariota threw a touchdown to himself, but that was not a great organization. And he came from New England, and they built Tennessee into the number 1 seed. And then they decided to trade A.J. Brown away because they didn't want to pay him in all that situation. And Brown goes off on Tennessee. Amy Adams Strunk, who's a terrible owner, she fires John Robinson. Eagles go to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's worked out for Tua and Tyreek so far as well. In Kansas City, they have Patrick Mahomes. Seattle doesn't have Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know why that would make sense to them. I don't know why the Jets will do that with Garrett Wilson, but I guess we can all dream, right? Final question coming over from Alex, who's talking about character issues, my favorite buzzword this time of the year. Alex saying, it looks like James Pierce is the latest victim of the NFL draft season character issues narrative. Should the Panthers take a closer look at him at 8 if he's available? It feels like the character issues players rarely have issues when they get to the NFL, and it allows teams later in the draft to get a higher upside player. Yep. You're right, Alex. You are right about that one. And one of those guys who had character issues and ones that actually were pretty well documented was Jalon Carter. There were questions on the field about Jalon Carter's want to. Would he show up and be ready to play all the time? Now, I do think that when you're at Georgia and there's like, let's be honest, Bama, and then if LSU has their head on straight, that's the only competition in the SEC against you. You're not showing up. I mean, Tennessee, no offense, but like, come on. No, the Vols they're not pushing around Georgia. Florida right now, they got nothing for the dogs right now. So there's rarely any games where Jalon Carter at UGA had to really have it all on and ready to go. So there's question about his motor and his want to. You got none of those questions now when you watch that guy play, because in the NFL, when the money's big, he wants it. He was outstanding. Now, off the field, there were questions about him because he was involved in that street racing incident that led to a Georgia staffer and a Georgia player to be killed. Alcohol was also involved with those two in the other vehicle, not with Jalon Carter. There was other issues that he had at UGA, but it's like the reckless driving, the Georgia speed racers, which they're all about that down there, Athens, and Kirby's done nothing to quell that situation, which is just ridiculous. But like, those are legitimate issues. And, that led him to fall all the way to 9 to Philadelphia, who had, I believe it was a down year, or maybe they had a trade to get up there. I don't know, but they were up there. They got him at 9 and they won the Super Bowl 2 years after that. So yeah. And then remember when the NFL told us because of the S2 cognition test that CJ Stroud was mentally challenged. Remember that? Because that's what they were trying to tell us, that he was stupid. Yeah, this guy's an idiot. You can't draft him. What happened? He was just a rookie of the year offensively. And the Texans beyond the playoffs the last 2 years, won the division. But CJ Stroud's a dumbass. That's what we were being led to believe because of some tests we've never even heard of. Come on, man. So the character issues is always BS. James Pierce Jr., I'm always going to defend guys from the QC, and he's a Charlotte guy. I saw Eric Ainge, former Vol quarterback who now does radio up there in Knoxville. I know those people are not going to like me saying Nashville. Up in Knoxville. He said James Pierce doesn't want to talk to the media or me or you. Dude just wants to play football, and he's elite at it. If I'm an NFL team, sign me up for the baller that just loves football. People calling that character issues, and he has 3 eye roll emojis. So I couldn't really find anything. It's always just because like we've seen people go on TV and talk and bring up like, oh, their teams have some issues, but they never say what are the issues. Like Jalon Carter, you could point to it. James Pierce Jr., like the issue is he doesn't want to speak to the media. Is that the issue? I saw him speak to the media at the combine. I saw some clips, and he seemed to be totally fine speaking to them. I don't know what the character issues are, Alex. We never know. There's always some coward behind there saying it. And I got a pretty good idea of the kind of people who do that kind of stuff. So that's part of what I hate about this time of the year is let's just tear down these kids and their biggest moments of their lives and say how they're trash human beings so that maybe they fall back. Maybe it's a team calculated effort. Maybe it's the Eagles doing this again. I'm not saying they did it before, but maybe it's Philadelphia, that they're the team doing it, that they're trying to just get these guys to fall and then they can draft them. It's all ridiculous to me. But yay to character issues and all the bull that's going to come out over the next 2 months. We'll find a way to just focus on all the positives and the fun things that can be talked about here in this draft cycle. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Host for yours, Julie and Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show on YouTube or wherever you listen to, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and at Blue Sky. On Blue Sky at Julian Council, at me, DM me to get those weekly Friday mailbag questions in next week. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, keep pounding, and I will talk to y'all on Monday.